Many of us understand that sleep quality is vital to our operation in daily life, but what you might not be fully aware of is just how detrimental low quality sleep might be to your athletic endeavours. In the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine and Science and Sports, Simpson, Gibbs and Matthiasson produced a review titled Optimizing Sleep to Maximize Performance, Implications and Recommendations for Elite Athletes. Now, you don't have to be an elite athlete to appreciate all of these issues that poor quality sleep will represent for your athletic performance. Sleep loss appears to reduce athletic performance despite equivalent applied effort and may relate to observed reductions in glycogen stores in muscles even prior to performance following just one night of total sleep deprivation. One night of sleep loss has also been shown to reduce time to exhaustion and increase resting oxygen uptake and resting carbon dioxide production. Even a single night of sleep or partial sleep loss has been shown to increase heart rate and oxygen consumption, as well as higher lactate levels during a cycling test. Even mild sleep restriction can affect accuracy and athletic performance. In a study of tennis players, reducing sleep duration to 5 hours for a single night impaired serving accuracy from an average of 53 to 37%. Sleep loss also has been shown to impair dart throwing accuracy following a night of sleep restricted to 4 to 5 hours when compared with a full night's sleep. The study also demonstrated decrements in throwing accuracy as a function of chronobiological factors. On the opposite end of the spectrum, one study, college men basketball players were encouraged to obtain as much nocturnal sleep as possible and were able to increase objectively measured average sleep durations from an average of 6.6 hours per night to 8.5 hours per night. Compared with baseline, performance following the 5 to 7 week sleep extension period reflected a 5% increase in speed, 9% increase in free throw accuracy, 9% improved free throw percentage, and 9.2% increase in 3-point field goal percentages. Another study found that expanding sleep duration by an estimated 2 hours per night improved the serving accuracy of college tennis players from 36% to 41%. The review broke the segments of negative impacts of sleep down into several different areas. The first they looked at was attention. So numerous studies show that sleep loss negatively impacts attention. There is also mounting evidence that catching up on sleep following chronic sleep restriction does not immediately restore full performance. This finding is particularly important for athletes who may undergo a period of mild sleep restriction during intense pre-competition training with the false expectation that they can quote-unquote catch up on sleep in the night or two before a big event and erase any performance deficits. They looked at executive function, which is the most important domain for athletic performance during competition. Executive functioning encompasses the higher level thinking required to apply strategy, making decisions, and manage attention. Multiple studies have shown that they collectively suggest that insufficient sleep may have a significant negative impact on athletes' ability to make a game time decision, read and react to opposing defense, or implement a specific competition strategy. So another very important function of being an athlete is learning skills and retaining this ability and learning them at a higher rate than other athletes preferably. So good quality sleep fosters increased consolidation of memories and allows for faster and better performance on learned tasks requiring physical execution. One landmark study demonstrated that a night of sleep resulted in a 20% increase in motor speed without the loss of accuracy compared to a similar amount of time awake. There's also evidence that sleep and dreaming is critical to offline memory reprocessing and consolidation. So another very important factor to being an athlete is injury or your injury risk. And it comes as no surprise that if you're negatively affected in terms of your skill development and your ability to apply effort or the same amount of effort for less work, it will possibly put you at more risk of injury. So adolescents sleeping less than 8 hours per night were found to be 1.7 times more likely to experience a significant injury than those who slept for more than 8 hours. The impact of inadequate sleep on reaction time and cognitive abilities is likely to contribute to this increased injury risk. So essentially the athletes were more clumsy and less able to make better quality decisions. As many of you will know, being sick, and especially in recent times, is of major inconvenience for many athletes, and even if a sickness or illness is minor in terms of its health issues, it likely derails training by a large amount, given that you need to reacclimatize, restart your training block, insert yourself into a particular scenario, or regress several weeks to make up ground. You can lose a significant amount of training blocks each year to illness. And it should come as no surprise, on top of that reduction in sleep time makes you more susceptible to becoming ill. In a 2009 study Participants tracked their sleep and then were inoculated with a dose of active cold virus. Individuals sleeping less than 7 hours per night prior to inoculation were 3 times more likely to develop a cold after a direct application of cold virus than those sleeping 8 hours or more. A follow-up study by this research team found a significant increase in risk of developing cold with less than 6 hours of sleep per night compared with sleeping 7 or more hours. Finally, probably one of the most important things for many athletes is weight maintenance and maintaining a high quality of body mass. Now, a lot of our videos do touch on the subject when we touch on weight class athletes being at the most optimal level of body fat versus lean body mass in your weight class and how to maximize this as much as possible. There is a lot of evidence suggesting that good quality sleep will make this job not only easier, but in fact it's near impossible unless a large amount of performance enhancing drugs are applied to compensate for this lack of sleep. So there's a wealth of data showing a relationship between sleep duration and body mass index, with short sleep durations in particular associated with higher BMIs. These associations have been observed in epidemiological studies both cross-sectionally and prospectively. Further, short sleep durations are associated with changes in metabolic hormones related to appetite and food consumption in both epidemiological and experimental restriction studies. Now, so there's some interesting data on this in relation to people's habits. So the reviewers could say these changes in hormone patterns can help also to explain changes in food intake patterns that follow sleep restriction, with a shift towards increased carbohydrates and snacks. Yes, a review paper did put snacks in. Increased portion sizes were observed and a decrease in ability to process glucose. There's also limited data suggesting that poor sleep quality is associated with reduced glucose metabolism. Lastly, one very important aspect in relation to being an athlete is kind of how hard you can train. And finally, I think a lot of people will probably be intuitively aware of this, but pain tolerance is decreased when undergone reduced sleep length and quality. Sleep is intimately involved in pain regulation, with one study finding an 8% decrease in pain threshold tolerance after a single night of total sleep deprivation. Others showing small but significant increase in spontaneous reported generalized pain after both total and partial sleep restriction. Interestingly, one study of mildly sleepy but otherwise healthy adults found that extending sleep opportunities for 4 nights increased pain tolerance by 20%.
So what happens now if you're one of these mildly sleepy or extremely sleep deprived adults and you're trying to train or trying to improve your athletic performance? So in many of the papers we look at in terms of like the area of sleep or the arena of sleep, the thing that's massively lacking is these practical applications, because most of the time practical applications will be 3 or 4 sentences saying further study is needed and that people need to sleep more. But one of the great things about this particular paper is their practical application section is weighty. They give some actual real world advice that in the realms of strength and conditioning or in the realms of sport and performance psychology are actually very, very useful. So the first thing you have to look at is total sleep time. I think everybody will agree now that total sleep time is probably just the most important thing in the realm of sleep at the moment. Sleep quality is important, your different phases of sleep are important, but just total time asleep is really, really important. Now, most people will listen to this, and if you're one of these people, you'll say, okay, I get as much sleep as I possibly can, but I have a job or I have a family or I have to train, and all of these things encroach on my total amount of time asleep. And that's absolutely fair. This is as relevant for an elite athlete as it is for an everyday person who might have a job and other commitments going on. You just have to consider the elite athlete has a massive amount of time spent actually training and that they just need more sleep than you overall. But what can you actually do? So the first thing when you look at total sleep time, and the first recommendation they make, is that you need to start actually tracking your sleep. So self-reported tracking. You don't need to be wearing a wearable tracker. You don't need to have some sort of app on your phone. Self-reported tracking through using a notebook next to your bed or through using an Excel sheet. Or there's a good tracker they actually tag in the paper and mention in the paper from the American Association of Sleep Medicine. So this is a really simple thing. When you're going to sleep, you put in your sleep time. When you wake up in the morning, you put in the time you wake up in the morning, and then through self-reporting for a period of 2 weeks is what they actually recommend, you will figure out your total time asleep, and then through all these all the self-reporting measures we do, we'll find some way to increase them. The second thing when you look at total sleep time is they highly recommend the implementation of a nap. Now, a nap in the middle of the day is not possible for most people in most situations. So they actually make a very good recommendation of you try and implement naps on weekend days and on off days of training. So if you work a full-time job, or if you have other commitments going on and a nap in the middle of the day isn't possible, then you take Saturday and Sunday and you focus on getting a nap in the middle of a day on both of those days. And then on your off days from training, in that block of time where you would have been training, you just slot in a nap there instead. And they're kind of talking about anywhere from 30 minutes to 90 minutes of kind of total sleep time during that nap. The second piece then is healthy sleep habits. So everybody's heard these. Everybody knows about good sleep hygiene now. It's kind of a thing that's been beaten to death on social media in the last 2 or 3 years. Sleep hygiene isn't complicated. Cold, dark room that doesn't have a lot of external factors being applied upon you, right? Here they're talking about 30 to 60 minutes pre-sleep. Or pre-going to bed, where you try and limit those sort of external stressors on your system. And it is something that nobody does. Like, I work with a lot of athletes in the realm of sports psychology, or just helping them along the way with that. And nobody leaves their phone outside the bedroom. And it's just like every single study you look at in the realms of sleep understands that TV in the bedroom and phone before bed are a bad idea. Yet everybody does it. Across the board, you're probably going to see something like an hour difference in quality sleep time if you do without your phone or without a screen in front of you for the last hour before bed. And I don't know anybody who does it.
A whole hour?
A whole hour. I don't know anyone who does it. I know a lot of people who are trying to work in their sleep, and yet this little gremlin always stays in the bedroom with them. The third thing then they talk about is the impact of travel, right? So obviously this paper and this review in general was done looking at athletes, in particular elite athletes. Travel around the world is just part of being an athlete, and so they focus quite heavily on the impact of travel. An interesting thing when they looked at jet lag is they have found that per hour of time zone change, it took 1 day to acclimatize to that new time zone, right? So if you're moving somewhere that's 3 hours away, it will take around 3 days of just standard waking and sleeping to acclimatize to that. If you're moving somewhere that's 12 hours away, it could take up to 12 days to acclimatize to that sleep pattern. So if you're somebody who's traveling to World Championships and you're going to Colombia and it's 4 hours away, you definitely want to be there probably a week in advance if it's going to take you 4 days to properly acclimatize to that new time zone. The second thing they talk about with travel, and this is kind of more appropriate for the non-elite athletes now as well, is the environmental factors of travel. So this goes the same as if you work in an office building where you mightn't have great access to nature, you mightn't have great access to a canteen or anything like that. It goes for people who travel a lot, just drive a lot for work. So if you're a sales rep and you're in a car a lot, it also goes to people who are in restricted time zones of work. So if you're a teacher and you're in a classroom and you know you're going to be in that classroom for 3 hours in a row, say, these things are highly applicable to you and your sleep. So what they're talking about here is low physical activities, changes in food and drink patterns, decreased ability to hydration. All of these things have a massive influence on our sleep, and most of the time we don't really think about them all that much. We think, oh, I'm a teacher, I go and teach people, I have 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon. How will that have a negative effect on my sleep? Well, if you've decreased access to water or decreased access to ample nutrition, it's obviously going to have a massive influence. If you're somebody who works at a desk and you do large swathes of time at the desk, you obviously have decreased access to regular physical activity. So it's really important, if you are somebody who's kind of trying to get your sleep squared away or trying to get your sleep improved, that these environmental factors have a massive influence on us. And it's not just the environmental factors directly before you go to sleep, it's the environmental factors throughout the entire day. Okay, the third thing then is very, very interesting, and it's addressing actual sleep disorders. So there's a large proportion of people who will struggle with their sleep who have nothing wrong with them. They just struggle to get to sleep. Maybe it's environmental factors. Maybe it's a host of factors like stress, diet, lifestyle. But there is a cohort of people out there who have a diagnosable condition where sleep is going to be incredibly difficult for them to obtain. So things like insomnia. In cases like this, they recommend going to a sleep clinic. So if you are aware of what a sleep clinic is, you'll basically get hooked up to a number of machines. You'll go into a room over the course of multiple visits and they'll monitor you in your sleep. Anybody who's gotten testing done for things like sleep apnea or any of those will have gone to a sleep clinic to get that done. But in an interesting note here, they talk about the use of online cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's multiple ones like BetterHelp and things like that online where you can get cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia over the internet remotely. So if there's not a sleep clinic near you, or going to a sleep clinic is monetarily inhibitory, you can use an online service, avail of some cognitive behavioral therapy, and possibly look at your diagnosable sleep issues with the help of a qualified therapist. Finally, then they talk about assessing the impact of sleep on your training. So for every athlete in the world, if you're going into an off-season period, you'll probably test at the start and test at the end. Or if you're going through a pre-season training block, you'll surely have some sort of aerobic testing beforehand and some sort of aerobic testing afterwards. You might be doing that on your own, you might be doing it with a coach, you might be doing it with a team and a national governing body. But even if you're just somebody who goes to the gym, you'll understand, I can bench press 40 kilos now. In 6 weeks time I can bench press 50 kilos. But athletes rarely do that with their sleep, and they'll rarely see kind of quantitative data for just how much a poor episode or poor night's sleep affects them. And considering the prevalence of poor sleep in athletic populations or people who are just physically active, it is very, very important to understand how much of an effect it's going to have on you. So in studies where people have just kind of like a 2-hour decrease in their actual sleep they got, might be that they got home late at night, or maybe you were out on a Friday night and you want to train or compete on a Saturday, you're looking at somewhere around a 10% decrease in throwing accuracy in a throwing sport like basketball. Particularly in basketball, you're looking at a 10% decrease in free throw effectiveness after just a 2-hour decrease in your sleep the night before. So this isn't even over a chronic sleep deprivation. This is just from one night of sleep deprivation, you have massive decrease in accuracy and things like that. So if you are in the position where maybe you work shift and sometimes your sleep is negatively affected, or maybe sometimes when you go visiting family or something like that, your sleep is negatively affected, it is important for athletes to understand what that effect is. Now, there's quite a genetic component to this. You certainly see outliers. So one interesting thing from the review is they talk about the intra-individual differences in terms of the psychological components of sleep deprivation. So you can have a cohort of athletes that are in no way negatively affected by being sleep deprived, and then you'll have the vast majority of people who are massively affected by it. So if you are in that position, or you consider yourself to be one of those people, it would be interesting to do it. Just as you're doing it, one thing it's definitely found is that aerobic work is affected a hell of a lot more than anaerobic work is. So depending on your sport, if you're a powerlifter, sleep deprivation mightn't be as much of an issue in the acute setting as it would be if you're a sprinter or a 400 meter athlete. Another thing is if your skill is quite a low skill sport, so if it's just something where you may have to produce a lot of power or a lot of force, it's probably not going to be as massive an issue as if you're somebody who's competing in a chess tournament. So definitely the cognitive elements are affected more than the physical elements, and then within the physical elements, aerobic and power pieces seem to be more affected than just pure strength and force pieces.
So obviously this video is hugely motivated by our sleep supplement campaign, and we want to just impact as much fear propaganda on your desire to sleep as possible. One interesting thing in this, on a serious note, is, oh my god, Daire has an inverted roller on his... I didn't know you were a psychopath.
Be very careful with that way.
No, so that's... Daire, you're a psychopath. So there's one little clip here, so they're talking about, just in the intro, so limited additional research suggests that some athletes, in particular NFL players, have higher rates of obstructive sleep apnea, sleep disordered breathing, a sleep disorder that reduces nighttime sleep quality. Now, I wonder why that is.
Well, when it could be to their higher relative body mass, or it could be because they're all on gear.
We'll just never know, you know.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Please do let us know your comments down below. We'll have the references for these papers in the description. If you have direct questions about your sleep or anything like that, we will be keeping an eye in the comment section. So please do tune in.
How very Scandinavian that the applications are so practical, do you know?
Very practical.
Like, as at the end you usually see, like Daire mentioned, where it's like further research is warranted, and you'll know they've come in with an agenda on this interventionist study, and they'll say weighted box jumps, while did not show any evidence reducing power, could be used selectively to improve an athlete's power or whatever. Further research is warranted, like some weird kiss me ass statement or whatever. But they're like loads of practical applications, which is very interesting.
And good, novel practical applications too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's difficult for you to nap during the day because you have time. Nobody has time. So you need to practice napping at the weekend.
Yeah, do you like naps, Sarah?
I like naps.
Yeah, I do like naps.
I don't have them half often enough. Thanks, guys.